Welcome to the April version of the Baltimore SharePoint users group. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get right into tonight's meeting. I'm going to bring up the slides. So just to make sure you're in the right place, this is Baltimore SharePoint users group. And I'll go into who we are, what we do, and I will take things from there. So this is our agenda for the evening. We'll go into announcements and overview, feature presentation, any closing remarks, and wrap things up at 7:25, roughly 7:30 sharp. And depending on interaction, questions, so on and so forth, we may end things a bit earlier, but tonight will be mostly content focused. So let's go into the meeting. So we talk about Baltimore SharePoint. Um, the story is a ongoing testament to community, to making sure that we continuously have an environment that solves problems for our users. So the Baltimore SharePoint Users Group was started in 2007, and the group was originally started as a uh, community group that was focused on solving problems for the release of MOS 2007 at the time. Many work centers were using SharePoint Portal Server 2003 and WSS or Windows SharePoint Services. And so when moving into Office SharePoint Server 2007, that we, meaning the company that Baltimore SharePoint was started at, we were focused on supporting companies who were early adopters of Office SharePoint Server 2007. So they didn't just want to roll out the out of the box or native features. They wanted to do lots of heavy customizations around the server platform. As many of you know, SharePoint in itself is a development platform, but as future releases came along, it became a lot easier to customize, a lot more user friendly. But during these times, it was not. The biggest challenge was that there was very little documentation around the customizations that needed to be made, or not too many, let's say, paths that were trailblazed to say, okay, if you're going to do feature stapling, if you're going to customize my sites, if you're going to deploy solutions and custom solutions, this is the way forward. Blogs in themselves, through the release of SharePoint MOS 2007, were one of the biggest evolution points that tended to happen. And so, with that being said, we had an ongoing challenge, and there were long hours. And my partner, co-founder in the group at the time, Eric, he mentioned based on my work with SUG DC, or the SharePoint Users Group at the time of Northern Virginia, since it originally started in DC and moved down to the Dulles area, it still was going by SUG DC. And so I was commuting long, an hour and a half to get to the Northern Virginia user group, even though I lived in Maryland. And so the idea made perfect sense to start a community that was closer to home. And so way back in 2007, Baltimore SharePoint was started, and we are the longest running Microsoft focused community institution in the great state of Maryland. And so, with that being said, let me zoom out a bit. By the numbers, we've helped train, certify over 1,600 Microsoft professionals. So when you factor in how long we've been around and the impact that we've had, is something that very proud of, and it's a foundation that we'll continue to build upon. And so we also have had, we have to update these numbers because when we tell the story of what individuals have as members of Baltimore SharePoint that have gone on to start companies that have become silver and gold Microsoft partners. And that number is continuing to grow. And I'm happy to be a part of that evolution. Special thanks to the good folks at ProObject, Ted Staley, and company, who, when we were meeting in person, would open their doors every month, every third Thursday of the month, and make sure that we had a stable location in order to host our meetings. Many of you may not realize this, but if you ever get the inspiration to host a user group or a community group or a meetup of some sort, one of the biggest challenges that you're having growing your group is consistent location. This is one of the core factors to success in launching a group. And so if you get nothing else right, keep the location consistent. And we thank ProObject for their efforts in helping us maintain consistency. If you are in the job market and you are either looking for a position or your position or contract may be ending, please contact me directly, and I will make sure you're connected to Ted Staley and crew. Okay, so as I make sure that everyone is in our meeting, I will share my screen once again. Special thanks to ProObject. And so, in terms of what's going on in the community, community events, what's going on, the greater Microsoft scene, if we go to spsevents.org, April 26th through 28th will be the Microsoft 365 virtual marathon. You can register for this event, and you have 10 days till it kicks off. Make sure you register. It is 100% virtual from the comfort of your desktop or laptop or mobile device. And also, as we go back to the home page, the Microsoft 365 Philly virtual event. So what this is a free one-day event that features the best and brightest speakers. Call for speakers is still open through the end of April. So get your sessions in if you want to speak at the event. And as it has been a flagship event for the Mid-Atlantic community. So make sure you submit if you want to attend, register if you want to speak. Then you go to the speakers tab and submit your session. So the website, for those of you who may not be familiar, is spsevents.org. spsevents.org. Moving along. Now, for those of you who are going through uh, career changes, job uncertainty, please submit your resume to hello at Mr. Shadi. That's my email address. And we currently have a resume review partner so that we're able to turn around the resumes in a timely fashion. In that, if you're a member of Baltimore SharePoint Users Group, if you've attended meetings in the past 12 months, calendar year, then you are eligible to have your resume reviewed, your LinkedIn profile reviewed, complimentary on us. So we're going to be reviewing resumes and career outlook through June 30th, 2021. So June 30th, 2021, if you're in the job market, if you lost your job, if you're in between, or if you're in a position where your particular company is going in a different direction, we will review your resume and give you a qualified perspective. So thank you to our resume partner for uh, providing that insight. Also, thank you to people who are tuning in through our Facebook community, through our Periscope community, and thank you to BPM Inc. For being a streaming partner for this event. BPM Inc. for being a streaming partner for this event tonight. And for those of you, as I mentioned, there are people within our group who have gone forward and launched their own practices, became freelancers, transitioned from employee to entrepreneur. And I encourage you, if you are looking to go in that direction, most people who start their own business do so out of necessity, meaning they received the pink slip, they were laid off, or they just were unfulfilled as a whole and made the decision to launch or leverage their knowledge, skills, and abilities and become self employed. So if that sounds like you, then you have access to free advice through our partner, which is Score Greater Baltimore. What is Score Greater Baltimore? Score Greater Baltimore is the nation's largest network of certified business professionals. And so you will get access to a business mentor who will help you with business planning, sales projections, so on and so forth to help you because you may know how to develop, you may know how to build site collections, you may be a rock star project manager, but the business aspects you may struggle with. And so they are here to help you to grow. So special thank you to Score Greater Baltimore. Free of charge if you go and fill out the information here and to get the help and support that you need. SharePoint Saturday or Microsoft 365 Saturday Baltimore is in the works of being planned. And so more details will be provided on that particular event, which will be coming soon. We're very excited to host our first virtual conference and continue down the path of delivering our brand of community events. So, and so we're going to discuss spring cleaning your document management environment in today's session. as I transition to slides, PowerPoint slides, and share my screen once again. Okay, so we'll transition to slides. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we are. Spring cleaning your document management process. Let's go into what we will cover in this presentation. First of all, where did this topic come from? So, in my work over the years, especially recently, I found that the biggest X factor to adoption, or let's take a step back. What are some of the biggest benefits to using SharePoint Office 365? No matter what new bells and whistles come along, the document management features, especially when you start to work within uh, agencies, organizations, so on and so forth, enterprise, the document management features, versioning, let's say calendar sync, uh, metadata, and even folders within document libraries tend to be some of the most used features within environments. And so, one of the aspects that has always helped me throughout the years to extend projects, expand contracts, etc., is focusing on document management as a whole. Keep in mind that Microsoft Office is the, let's say, largest or most used productivity suite in the world. And so SharePoint, Office 365, whether on-prem, in a cloud, or a hybrid version, is is built for that productivity. And sometimes what we do and what hurts our adoption within our environments, especially if you're a consultant who is brought in to manage that adoption, is that we tend to look at the system itself as separate from the work that needs to be done. And in many cases, where adoption is the highest, or let's say the greatest rate of adoption, happens to be where the focus is on the work being done, not learning SharePoint. So mapping the skills that need to be done in order to complete the job versus learning SharePoint. So if your system is a timesheet system and is built using SharePoint or Office 365, your information workers, your employees only care about submitting their timesheets so they can get paid and they don't receive annoying emails. And when it's focused around that versus the SharePoint time system, you oftentimes will find a greater result when you build your systems. And that's the difference between when you build something and it works on your machine versus building something that has the input of the decision makers, of people who have, let's say, daily use of the systems and an understanding of what the organization needs from you, the developer, the administrator, the project manager. So we're going to cover maintenance and why the value of it for document management. I'm going to go into a few war stories and tell some best practices for maintenance and some golden questions to ask when planning your maintenance. So we'll also go into a few key areas when we talk about governance. We talk about architecture, platform maintenance as well. So we often focus on getting our environment ready, but we don't often focus on the maintenance of. Those of you who are IT pros, you understand maintenance, you understand backup, recovery, so on and so forth. But the system itself, when we talk about Windows, for example, or Windows Server Platform or database management, we understand maintenance and fine tuning and database tuning, so on and so forth. But when it comes to our SharePoint environment, other than patching, and whether you're doing the patching on prem or if it's set for, let's say, auto updates within the cloud, we don't think about the maintenance of the environment from a content level, from a site collection level, from a subsite level, and from a list and library level. And that's where the tug of war or the war of adoption is oftentimes won. So so when we look at document management, uh, let's ask the following questions. And these are things that you, again, these are based on my experiences. So the benefit for you would be to ask yourself these questions and find out where it fits for your environment. And so the value that I bring to you as a presenter is that I spend a lot of my time going to different environments, and my perspective is based on a wide range of review of environments, speaking to different decision makers, developers, technical leads, architects, etc. And these are the gaps that I oftentimes see. And so we'll cover, do you categorize the spring cleaning that needs to take place as governance? Do you consider it to be information architecture, or is it platform architecture? So let's go into these in detail. So from a governance standpoint, when you perform spring cleaning, the question that I have for you, what is the result? Meaning, what policies, what procedures tend to update and change as a result of you reviewing content, going through a content refresh period? And do you even have scheduled content refresh periods within your overall environments? These are questions that, as a consultant, as a team lead, and let me just bring you into a small secret here. At the salary that you tend to be paid as a senior professional, these are the questions that you should be asking your leadership within the environment. They are trusting you to come up with the right questions that lead to increased performance. So, what is the result of spring cleaning? Uh, when you find those results, when you go through the spring cleaning process, the question becomes, how does it impact your overall documentation? What documents need to be updated? What governance documents? Uh, and these documents, similar to a business plan, these are living, breathing documents, which means when you go through uh, a major, let's say, scenario where, or evolution is the word I'm looking for, it should reflect in the documentation that you're updating and maintaining. And we oftentimes build without decision makers in the loop. So, how, when you have a content refresh period, how are you updating your documentation and how are you communicating those changes to your senior decision makers, your executives, your team leads in the process? So if you make the update to documentation in silence and, off to the side, and you happen to leave the project, you never want your work to be discovered. Meaning, oh well, there was a README file within the admin center of the site, or because oftentimes as a senior professional, when these changes are being made, you're going to receive the blame for anything that goes wrong. So you want to make sure that what you're building is a collaborative effort. We oftentimes act as individuals when building and maintaining collaborative systems, if that makes sense. So, moving on into information architecture. So, there's a difference between information architecture and platform architecture. That's when we start to look into our keywords, our particular terms or term stores, depending on the version of SharePoint that you may be using. And so, when a new team comes on board, or when there's new documentation, how is that impacting your overall schema, your overall IA or information architecture? And so, what language or lingo is being used within the organization? So, those of us who are have worked within government organizations, and especially those of us who have worked within the military, we tend to know some acronyms. We know quite a few. We can name. We can have a whole conversation using acronyms. The question is, are those terms part of the language of the organization through search and other metadata and other forms of systems that we use to look up information, to capture information, to uh, filter, so on and so forth. So our custom columns, our search, so on and so forth, all driven by our information architecture. And so you may use a certain language within your environment, but it may not reflect within your systems. And so I'll give you a perfect example. And this was considered a great innovation at the time, but with the Pennsylvania.gov official state website, one of the biggest improvements that we wanted to bring to the table was having a search engine that was based around Pennsylvania agencies, Pennsylvania, let's say parks and recreation, and all things Pennsylvania. So if you went to this website and you did a search, if you went to pa.gov and you did a search for, let's say, benefits. Now, benefits can take you to Care First, it can take you to life insurance, it can take you to features and benefits from a marketing standpoint if you're doing a search on a general search engine such as Bing, such as Google. But we wanted it to be PA aware, Pennsylvania aware. And when you search for benefits, it's going to bring up specific departments and agencies that are relevant and local to Pennsylvania citizens. And so that could only be done through having a robust information architecture engine. And so that's one example of having terms that are used but also reflected through the systems that our citizens would use. So within your work center, you may have an intranet, you may have a single, let's say, site collection or a page that your team members access. It may just be a site that is only for collaboration of a few team members. But how are you using the language of, how are you capturing the language of the organization and ensuring that it is reflected within the system? That should probably be an additional question here, but there's only three. But, and finally, are there any trends that we need to capture? So let's say if you were an accounting firm, for example, and it's tax season. So if from January to April, for example, there's going to be different terms than the rest of the year, or a heavier focus or heavy keyword density on taxes, or on terms related to taxes, filing, IRS, so on and so forth. And so the trends throughout a calendar year for a given business or organization or entity will change based on the calendar, based on the needs, and your organization as the consultant, expert, technical lead, which are most of the people who attend user group meetings. You need to think about what this means from an information architecture standpoint. And finally, platform architecture. So, when certain documents are added to an environment, so we're thinking more so of the platform itself. So, if you think from a server standpoint on up, that can also include site collections, but the containers that are housing the content on the website. So that can be a site, that can be a library, that can be the database, that can be the web front ends. And so you want to consider all of these aspects. That can also include the browser, which is often not considered when thinking about platforms, unless the site happens to be slow or the browser, there's custom development and the browser itself is not compatible with certain changes that have been published. So, item level backups from a content standpoint, you want to consider how you're using item level backups. If, for example, there are documents that come into the work center that need to be uh, archived, that have a certain retention policy, that have a certain, the right person needs this document at a moment's notice. And so, from my experience working within military, within working especially with judges and at Department of Justice, where we supported over 700 lawyers. If the right person is missing the wrong document, that is going to cause long days and nights for everybody involved. And so, from a document management standpoint, I want you to consider how are you able to access the documents that your organization needs at a moment's notice. One of the ways to do so happens to be item level backups. Now, there's numerous ways to perform item level backups, but these are considerations that you need to keep in mind. Next would be site level backups. So, one of the benefits that we often overlook and that we often take for granted is that using SharePoint, for example, allows for team members to create sites without having to submit tickets to IT teams that take weeks to build, develop, and deploy. And so when we talk about allowing or granting access to specific people in order to create sites, if a site is lost, if a site is deleted accidentally, of course, all of this is done accidentally. I didn't realize I deleted the site. And so, what's your backup strategy for your site level backups? And of course, third party tools. So if I say item level backups and I say site level backups, and you don't have an idea of how to accomplish that programmatically, maybe PowerShell or otherwise, then you may also have, let's say, a large amount of data that needs to be backed up, archived, and that's where the third party tool begins to come in, where it allows you to complete these tasks with a few clicks of the mouse. And so there's numerous tools from AvePoint on down the line in order to accomplish this particular goal. In future sessions, we will have additional vendors to come in and discuss and share and demo third-party tools that will help. Let me take a moment and open the floor for any questions. Any questions on the information that has been covered so far? We'll take a look at social media. Have any questions? Simply list them in the chat based on either perspective, uh, so on and so forth. Again, these are not things that I have seen a lot of environments, and documentation and how documents are managed is oftentimes one of the biggest challenges to adoption within organizations. Thank you for those who are tuning in on social media. Okay, moving along. Okay, so when we talk about best practices, it all starts with your team. So again, as professionals, this is directed as people who oftentimes are the managers, the hands, meaning the builders, the managers of the environment. So communication is your best tool in the toolkit, where engaging your team really helps in this case. Change management, meaning if you don't have a change management process, this would be a great area to begin to implement change management. And or if you have a change management board and procedures, this is also a great opportunity to bring up the need for document management or content refresh periods as part of the change management experience. Oftentimes, change management does not include the content refresh, or as I eloquently listed, the spring cleaning for your environment, and follow up and follow through. So, your spring cleaning process will result in numerous changes that need to be made. And if you do not follow up and follow through, then is ultimately a waste of time. And so when you find those changes, you begin to implement those. Now, some questions for consideration as we begin to wrap up this particular session. First things first. Uh, is our document management policy by default or design? Now, if you do not define your document management policy, then by default, the habits or lack thereof will take over, and that'll be an ad hoc or impromptu policy. So you want to be deliberate with your document management, with your content refresh. Again, we focus on rolling out the environment, launching the tenant, but we don't focus on how our users are interacting with our content. We call it adoption in other cases, but adoption tends to be a phase within a project. Content refresh is an ongoing evolution similar to code refresh. And so we want to bake this into our project plans moving forward. Next, how does our document strategy improve search? So this goes back to information architecture. So if we're doing keyword searches, if we're using third-party tools in order to uh, do content refreshes and improve our uh, content within our environment, then we also want to, as the follow up and follow through procedure, look at how search is being enhanced. So if you have a new department that is being rolled out and added into your overall tenant, think about how that group of people are going to use search and how we want to increase the findability of terms and documents and content within the search scopes and schema and results. And finally, do our permissions need to be modified? If you've done any work in the past 2 years using Microsoft 365, SharePoint, or Teams, you have without a doubt asked the question about external users. So external users will change based on who is on a project, and you need to understand your access list. So these power questions go into your platform architecture, your information architecture, and your item level backups, but also your security is a key area of this as well. And so asking yourself if permissions need to be modified is a very powerful and important point to make. And so that brings our presentation to a close. And are there any questions about document management? Does anyone want to tell a story or two? Or if you have questions on what I've shared and how it can benefit your environment, you can get yourself some free advice and save yourself the time of driving around to different environments and leverage what I've learned along the way. Any questions? Just unmute yourself or use the chat if you're in a noisy environment. Okay.
Hey, that was an excellent presentation. This is Harold. Quick question for you. I'm trying to put together a document management system, and my approach is sort of thinking, using, and this would be in SharePoint, to use the column function and create perhaps some metadata fields that would allow me to understand what type of document it is, by content type, and then break it up. And then I'm actually now wondering whether there would be a use for applying some sort of label, not a retention label, but like content type label that would allow me to go in and nudge people toward, hey, is this document necessary? X amount of time down the line. What's the best way to begin approaching that?
Well, um, ah, he's on this call. And so his name's Scott Brewster. And what Scott would say, he would mention content types in this case and has a few great presentations on it. I would always start with mapping what my users currently use. So I would do an audit. I would literally have my stakeholders bring their most heavily utilized recurring documents and templates to that planning meeting. If it's a printout, is even better. And so I would have them, let's say, now this is not the technical aspect, but these aspects are what lead to effective adoption of a system. And so I would analyze the keywords through asking questions, having worksheets, so on and so forth, so that I understand from a schema standpoint what I need to account for when it comes to my search, when it comes to my custom columns, when it comes to my filters, and when it comes to my overall metadata. So you want them to give you the language, the keywords that they're going to use, and as often as possible, you want to map any documents that require input to your content types. You always want to build from a content type standpoint and make sure that your templates, your documents are as intelligent as possible. And you want to regularly review your search results and your custom search pages and make sure that when people search for information, it reflects let's say the language of the organization. And if you focus on that and you enforce or encourage as part of your project plan regular refresh periods, meaning the system's going to launch, we're going to have training, 60 days from now, we're going to have a content refresh review. And throughout your, let's say, calendar year, you're going to have regular review periods that will ensure that the people who spend the most time on your documents they feel that their voice is heard, and they're actually going to use the system that you build to do actual work. There's many of us who roll out systems, but the people who do the work, they are doing the work in a shared network drive versus or keeping it on their desktop versus actually using SharePoint to do so. Does this answer your question?
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? These answers are based on a true story. Lots of pain. Half of my gray hairs come from document war stories. But I would say that there's two major secrets. If I was to say the secret to my success as a consultant, especially, I have a very, very, very high track record of getting on a contract or a project and extending it. And there's two reasons why. Number one is whenever I build a system, I always bake in the training aspect of it. The launch and the training are two pieces that I always include. And I build systems from a search and content standpoint. So many people focus on usability or buttons, which are important, but we oftentimes lose track of the fact that people only want to use the system to get their job done. And so when you understand what they're doing to get their job done, oftentimes it's content driven and it's report driven. And so when you build from that standpoint, people will actually use your system, which means that they want to keep you around so that they can understand it better. So that's some unsolicited consulting advice. Okay, any other questions before we wrap up for this particular Baltimore SharePoint user group meeting? Okay. So once again, Shadidi Laser here for another Baltimore SharePoint, the remote edition, and we'll keep this going in the face of vaccine and social distancing. Uh, it will be very clear to you when we will meet in person once again. But the question is, can we get the presentation slides? Please put your email in the chat, and I'll make sure you get the slides. Email in the chat. Okay, have your email. Okay, so this particular presentation was derived from an actual article that I wrote for a major third-party provider of Microsoft technology, and the article itself still has not been published. It's have to add more detail to it according to the editor, but I felt it would be good to um, turn it into a presentation format. And I'm glad that those of you who attended enjoyed it. So, on behalf of ProObject, on behalf of BPM Inc., our streaming partner, and folks just like you, I thank you for attending this month's Baltimore SharePoint user group meeting. If you would like to be a speaker at any point throughout calendar year 2021, the 2021 campaign or season, please drop me a line and we'll discuss your topic and make sure you're ready for virtual presentation. Last month was Fabian Williams. He spoke about Microsoft Graph, and stay tuned for next month for more quality Microsoft content. Thank you and enjoy your evening.